Casey's Top 40.
Now it's time for this week's AT&T Trivia Quiz, brought to you by AT&T. I is for individual. In 1986, Anita Baker hit big with a song that won her the Grammy for Best R&B Song. What was the name of that hit? Sweet Love, Sweet Dreams, or Sweet Freedom? The answer after this. Now, here's the answer to our question. In 1986, Anita Baker hit big with a smash that won her the Grammy for Best R&B Song. It was featured on the album Rapture, which earned her the Grammy for Best R&B Vocal Performance. The name of that song was Sweet Love. And that's this week's AT&T Trivia Quiz.
American Top 40.
These are the hits ranked by Billboard magazine. 3 songs debut this week, and dropping out of the survey are The Edge of Heaven by Wham, Oh People by Patti LaBelle, and You Should Be Mine by Jeffrey Osborne. Those 3 hits fall out. Here's our third debut. It's the first pop hit for a blues, jazz, and gospel singer from Detroit named Anita Baker. She's been hitting the soul chart, and her first song in the pop chart debuts at 35, Sweet Love.
The hits from coast to coast.
We're up to the first pop hit by Anita Baker, a singer who's barely 5 feet tall. Writer David Frick, seeing her in concert, asked, how did Anita Baker ever manage to squeeze so much voice into such a tiny frame? He was impressed, and he also said, there are about 8 million ways to say I love you in pop music. Anita Baker has come up with a few you'll never forget. End of quote.
American Top 40.
Counting down and moving up the chart, I'm Shadoe Stevens. Here's a singer who was born in Toledo, Ohio, grew up in Detroit, Michigan, and now lives in both Detroit and Los Angeles. She's Anita Baker, climbing 8 impressive notches to number 28, giving you the best that I got.
American Top 40.
I'm the Shadoe, D''SHADOE, counting down the real hits on American Top 40.
Number 16.
Well, singer Anita Baker might sound really soft and mellow, and she might look like a petite, sophisticated lady, but actually she says under all the soft ballads, the glittery dresses, and the makeup, she's a tough street kid. She said, I grew up in the inner city of Detroit, so I learned a lot.
The hits from coast to coast.
I'm Shadoe Stevens, counting down the biggest hits in the USA, and at number 27 is Anita Baker, who says that she has a very quirky songwriting process, that she never writes songs the same way twice. She says, for giving you the best that I got, I didn't like the lyrics, but it was this beautiful little groove. So I called the writer, and he said, go ahead and do what you want. So we worked on it from there. Anita Baker took it all the way to number 3.
For most of us, singing is something we do for the fun of it. But for one star in our countdown, it's a lot more serious than that. She says, I gotta sing or I'm gonna die. Details coming up.
Casey's Coast to Coast. Casey's Top 40.
I'm Casey Kasem. You know, for most of us, singing is something we do for the sheer fun of it. But for one truly committed professional in our survey, singing is everything. It's her life, and it's been a hard struggle to make it her livelihood as well. It was more than 10 years ago that she landed her first record deal as the leader of the group called Chapter 8. Unfortunately, the company she signed with wound up in Chapter 11, bankruptcy. When her musical world fell apart, Anita Baker became discouraged and gave up singing. She worked as a waitress near her home in Southfield, Michigan. But then she came to an important realization. Anita told us, quote, the desire to sing was just too great. I could still sing in church every Sunday and still get some satisfaction, but it wasn't enough. I found I needed to sing. I needed it to live. I discovered that I gotta sing or I'm gonna die, period. End of quote. With that much drive, nothing could keep Anita Baker down. She quit her job as a waitress and started singing anywhere she could, from cocktail lounges to private parties. If there was a singing job, she'd take it. She moved from weddings and lounges to small clubs, then to bigger clubs. And although it took a long time, eventually she got noticed and signed to a small label in Los Angeles. Her career was back on track. And after she moved over to Elektra Records in 1986, she hit the top 40 with songs like Sweet Love and Giving You the Best That I Got. It's been a long struggle for Anita Baker. It's taken her almost a decade to come back. But like she says, she had to sing or she was going to die. Here she is, climbing 7 notches to number 30 in our countdown with Just Because.
When I think about how much I'm loving you.
Number 17.
Well, our best wishes to songstress Anita Baker, who recently announced that she was secretly married last Christmas Eve. Anita tied the knot in her hometown of Detroit, marrying a marketing representative named Walter Bridgeforth. And the song played at her nuptials? Why, her Grammy-winning hit, Giving You the Best That I Got, of course.
Casey's Top 40.
Detroit's Anita Baker was raised on the sound of Motown, and she didn't get into jazz until she was in high school. She says, I started listening to the local jazz station. Only problem was that after 9 p.m. they started playing fusion, and it used to get me crazy. I couldn't listen to fusion and go to sleep.
CT40 with Casey Kasem.
These are the records you're buying and radio stations are playing all over the USA. Anita Baker recently told us, quote, my grandfather was a minister, and when I was 16, I was splitting my time between singing jazz for money and singing in the choir. I was a show-off, and what was beautiful about jazz was that I could show off singing it. I sure couldn't show off at church.
Casey's biggest hits.
4 years ago this week, one of the biggest hits in the USA was by Anita Baker, a singer who once put a highly successful solo career on hold to sing with a famous gospel group. It happened in 1987 when her solo career really took off. She just won 2 Grammys for her album Rapture, including Best R&B Vocal Performance. And the natural thing to do would be another R&B album. But for Anita, that seemed too easy. She wanted a bigger challenge. So just to see if she could do it, she joined the super gospel group called The Winans. They put out an album together, and the next year, Anita earned a Grammy with The Winans for Best Gospel Performance. She had proven she could sing gospel with the best. So she went back to a solo career, and the result was one of the biggest hits in the USA 4 years ago this week. Here's Anita Baker with Giving You the Best That I Got.
Casey's biggest hits.
5 years ago this week, one of the biggest hits in the USA was Just Because by a woman who's done it all, from washing combs in a beauty shop to waiting tables in a bar. And she says it all prepared her to be a star. Anita Baker also worked as a cook in a hospital and as a receptionist in a law office. And she says that in each case, she was able to follow her mother's advice. No matter what job you have, give it 100% plus. So no matter what Anita was doing, she acted as if she were the star of that job. She says she was the best comb washer her beauty shop had ever had. And when it comes to singing, Anita has been a star many times over. 5 years ago this week, she was shining with one of the biggest hits in the USA. Here's Grammy winner Anita Baker with Just Because.
Casey's biggest hits.
6 years ago this week, back in 1988, one of the biggest hits in the USA was by a singer who never knew her father and was abandoned by her mother, which is why she says she gives her children all the love she possibly can. Anita Baker says her childhood was not a happy one. Her father left her mother before Anita was born. Her mother abandoned Anita when she was just 2 years old. Anita was raised by her grandmother until she was 13. And then when her grandmother died, she lived with members of her church. She says that growing up, she never had the love she needed. And she's pledged that her 2 sons will never know a lack of love in their lives, not from their mother, who gives them all the love that she's got. And 6 years ago this week, Anita Baker had one of the biggest hits in the USA with a song about just that, Giving You the Best That I Got.
Casey's biggest hits.
7 years ago this week, back in 1988, one of the biggest hits in the USA was a song that might never have been recorded had the singer not been on her way to get a cup of coffee. It's a song whose writer had been trying to peddle it for some time. He sent it to a number of likely acts, all of whom turned it down. And that was what soul singer Howard Hewitt was about to do. He was listening to the song at Elektra Records and didn't think it was for him. But by one of those lucky chances, at that very moment, another Elektra artist walked past the listening room. She heard the song, and she really loved it. She said, quote, "It talks to me." She recorded it, and it turned into one of the biggest hits in the USA 7 years ago this week. Here's Anita Baker with Giving You the Best That I Got.
Casey's biggest hit.
8 years ago this week, back in 1988, one of the biggest hits in the USA was Giving You the Best That I Got, a song by a perfectionist who recorded this song line by line so that it was the best it could be. Anita Baker is famous for spending months in the studio getting her songs as right as they can be. Anita says she'll do dozens of takes of just a few words, and her songs are often assembled in the studio from a perfect line here, a perfect phrase there, and a perfect word from another take. The result is the best she can give. A perfection found in one of the biggest hits in the USA 8 years ago this week.
Casey's Coast to Coast.